Every morning plays out exactly the same. From the moment I shake the dregs of sleep off to the incessant blaring of a phone alarm, to the probably slightly too hot shower, to measuring out grounds of coffee for a pot that won't be finished. Not entirely. It is routine, it's comforting, and yet some mornings, more often than perhaps should be normal, I find myself standing struck still by an errant thought. Have I already done that this morning? Most people who know me personally would be quick to tell you that my memory isn't all that great to begin with, and performing the same basic tasks in the same order at the same time, day after day after day, certainly does not help my case. And yet, I continue to do it. There is a comfort in the routine, some solace that can be found in a familiar regimen, joy in repetition. Hello world, my name is Atticus, and welcome to The Experiment. Before going any further, I feel I must dispense some disclaimers. First and foremost, any opinion presented here is mine alone, and not necessarily shared by the project organization. Second, I will be talking about and showing footage from the games Hades, Sisyphus Reborn, and Othercide. I don't plan to divulge any major spoilers, but there will be gameplay footage which might have them. If that is a concern of yours, I would recommend either playing through them yourself or treating this more as a podcast than a video essay. And finally, despite my air of confidence, I speak as a video game player rather than a developer or journalist. In Hades, I also have a routine. I speak to everyone, spend whatever resources I have garnered, let fate make a minor decision, and then embark on another journey through the underworld. The rooms dance around, but they are the same rooms I've traversed and conquered before. Familiar faces, friendly and hostile alike, greet and remember me from my past forays. Eventually, I die and begin the process all over again. To call all of that repetition, however, might not be entirely fair. The actions play out in the same order, but the actions themselves are slightly different each time. I could, if I'm not careful, spend far too long talking about all the things I enjoy about Hades, the game, but I will try to stay on topic. There are two driving forces in Hades that keep the main routine, the game's core loop, the narrative and the plethora of mechanics. I mentioned earlier how friends and foe alike remember Zagreus, the main character, from past runs. This goes beyond a simple, oh yeah, did you ever get your sweet roll back? And evolves into entire character storylines that advance when you speak to a character and eventually give them a particular item or do a small quest for them. In this, the goal of a given run may not even be escape the underworld, but rather find and talk to this character. And that's absolutely wonderful. Even escaping the underworld can become rote after the 10th or so time doing it, so the fact that the narrative of a side character you run into every couple of runs can compel a player to brave those treacherous depths once more is a testament to the work and ability of the writing staff at Supergiant. At Supergiant, if you're watching, what follows is a copy of my resume. While I said narrative alone could compel another run, and I stand by that, even a stellar narrative would eventually find itself struggling against a stale gameplay experience, and this is where the plethora, or perhaps simply excess of mechanics and mechanical flavors come into play. Like most roguelikes I can think of, and that's not a high number, Hades offers upgrades both permanent and temporary. The permanent ones are nice and give a feeling of progression, even beyond the growth of the player's skill. But it is the temporary upgrades that truly stand out, which, now as I think of it, might just be on account of how flashy some of them are. The upgrades found during a run shape that run, and since there are so many different upgrades to find and a truly alarming number of ways in which they can interact with each other, no two runs ever feel the same. At least, they haven't yet for me. But I promised, to myself at least, if not necessarily to all of you, that I would not just gush about Hades, and that I would both talk about repetition and other games in which it is prominent. So now that we've spoken of joy, let us speak of repetition. Loops are, by their very nature, repetition, and since all games possess some gameplay loop, all games have some repetitive piece to them. From Hades' routine, which I outlined earlier, to traversing a route and conquering a gym in Pokemon, and even to digging to live and living to dig, all games have repetition. All games are, to some extent, repetitive in nature. The idea that sparked this script was wondering what made some forms of repetition more enjoyable than others. What was it about Hades that made me want to run through it again and again, but after my fourth or so reset in Othercide, I set it down, and I've only picked it back up for the sake of this video. I don't dislike Othercide by any means. In fact, I think it's a fantastic game. So why then have I not felt a similar drive to beat it, even once, if not repeatedly? It's not the lack of interesting mechanics, nor the lack of a compelling story. Othercide contains both of those in spades. On the mechanics side, its risk and reward take on action economy in an SRPG is phenomenal. It has that exquisite mix of player and character growth where over the course of the game, you, the player, get better at playing it, and your characters become stronger through both leveling and traits that are given to them depending on how you play. Which just might be my favorite part about this game. And yet, it lacks that same forward motion that Hades has, where even if a run isn't successful, a player can still feel a sense of accomplishment for furthering some narrative. And while Othercide does provide a variety in its missions and even allows the player to fast track or outright skip sections after having beaten them once, resetting still feels like being faced with an ever-growing mountain of things to get past just to get back to where you were. And this is where the hypocrisy and spark of this video come to light. Why do I, as a player, view it as a bad thing for Othercide, but rejoice when Hades does the exact same thing? Allow me a moment to step back into and then out of Hades to collect my thoughts on the matter. And allow me a minor Hades spoiler. In each region of Hades that Zagreus must fight through to escape, except for the last, there exists a room with a character that gives you one of 3 minor boons to help on your journey. In the first region, that character is Sisyphus. As I consider and reconcile these conflicting ideas, my thoughts continue to return to Sisyphus and his mythic punishment. For those unfamiliar, Sisyphus was condemned to pushing a boulder up a hill for the rest of eternity, except as the boulder neared the top of the hill, it would roll back down to the base, and Sisyphus would have to start anew. I imagine it was easier to make a boulder obey gravity than an everlasting uphill climb, though, with absolute control over space, wouldn't it? We're getting off track. Why was I talking about Sisyphus again? Right, Sisyphus was punished with doing the same meaningless task without ever even being able to say, "I did it." No feeling of accomplishment, no distractions, just him, the boulder, and the mountain. That is what I, at least, usually connotate with repetition. Something unpleasant and to be avoided while writing, and no, Atticus, just saying it was intentional doesn't make it good. If Supergiant is still watching this, please disregard that last bit. It was definitely a bit, I promise. A repetition comes in many shapes and forms. It can be a comforting routine with which to start the day, a way to remind oneself that they do have control over their lives. It can be done for impact, a joke, or even impact. Hades' core game loop, its main act of repetition, is used to frame different aspects of the game in a familiar scene. The player can better focus on the narratives unfolding around them or how to master the changing mechanics because they don't have to also process every room they enter. Othercide does almost exactly the same thing. Resets are framed within the narrative and the player is given the chance to master the mechanics and overpower their units. The difference is that nothing changes. Units can be revived or generated stronger than before, but the rooms, story, and mechanics all stay the same. And that's fine. It works incredibly well within the story presented, it just doesn't necessarily work for me, though I do absolutely plan to beat it. One day. Eventually. Ultimately, repetition is a tool, and how it plays depends on its utilization, the context, and the audience. It can hold joy or frustration, and in the realm of video games, it is an inevitability, making it worthwhile to consider how some games have done it well and what to avoid. The answer from Hades may seem to be just have a bunch of content, which simply is not a feasible answer in most cases. But the idea of a driving narrative is something that can be learned from. I have been Atticus, thank you for viewing, and that has been it for today. I will see you in the next one. Thanks.